Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Hero Signal. Today we're going to get into Marvel's Avengers and the complexities of its combat. For the most part, Marvel's Avengers is the kind of game where button mashers can find a home, and that's completely fine if that's working for you. But as you continue on to harder levels, or if you're just trying different characters that seem like they aren't playing the way that they should, I'm hoping this guide can help. For starters, Marvel's Avengers throws you into the fire with the A-Day mission, where you learn the basics but not much else. While I love the way Marvel's Avengers presents its combat, they only divulge bits and pieces of it to you as you progress through the story. In the current demo that we've played, combat is chopped up into several different parts. Some of it is aimed at teaching you how to learn a specific character, while others give you a more general depiction of combat as a whole. Even through all that, there may be some nuances that players aren't seeing or don't quite understand. Without further ado, let's get into understanding combat and making it as easy as possible to feel super heroic. There are a few different types of characters. We have characters like Black Widow and Iron Man who utilize quick combat and counterattacks, and then we have characters like Hulk who have a counter based on his rage ability and requires a little more of an aggressive approach to stay alive. The basics are simple. If you're using a controller, I'll be speaking specifically to PS4 controls, but the Xbox control conversion will appear on screen. Square is your light attack, triangle is your heavy attack, circle will allow you to dodge, or when held, leap over your target, and X is for jumping or your traversal powers. The L1 and R1 buttons are for your heroic abilities, while the L2 trigger allows you to aim, and the R2 trigger can activate your class's intrinsic ability or counter ability, unless the left trigger is also held at the same time, in which it will activate your ranged attack. Some characters have the ability to press both triggers at the same time to activate a special ability, but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. The L3 button will activate your sprint, and lastly the R3 button will activate your lock-on mechanism so you can lock onto a target. On the D-pad, the left and right keys will allow you to switch between your additional abilities that you have unlocked. So if you choose a character like Black Widow and want to switch between her regular dual pistols or her auto pistols, or whatever you have, this is the way to do that. Now that the basics are out of the way, let's talk a little about telegraphs. The telegraphs are the key to easy combat, and while I won't profess that knowing this information is completely simple, it will definitely make things easier if you keep a keen eye out. Enemies often telegraph their abilities in a few different ways. You get a little taste of this in the A-Day fight with Taskmaster, but many players may not truly understand it till they reach the first harm room. Enemies will have light blue, yellow, or red circles telegraphing the abilities they are about to perform. All characters, including Hulk and Ms. Marvel, have the ability to counter those enemies. If you utilize your R2 trigger during the telegraph, your character will perform a counter and not take any damage from the attack. Furthermore, the counter will make the enemies vulnerable to follow-up attacks, which will cause tons of damage to them, making them easier to kill. Telegraphs that are red are not counterable, so you do need to keep a close eye on the enemies and their telegraphs. If you dodge an attack during a telegraph using the circle button, this is considered a perfect dodge. And some perks on gear will proc when you complete a perfect dodge, so it may be important to know what exactly it is. In order to perform a longer dodge, you need to tap the circle button twice. Telegraphs don't just stop at different color circles on enemies that are attacking you at close range. When you are fighting, you might start to see little targets or exclamation circles pop up on the sides of your screen. That means that another enemy somewhere is targeting you, and if you don't dodge out of the way, you're going to get hit. Some of these telegraphs will fill up more slowly, signifying when you can expect the attack to occur. It's important to know when the attack goes off so you don't dodge early and still get hit. So we've learned a little bit about telegraphs. Let's learn about abilities now. As you level up, new abilities open up for you. I'm not going to get into what abilities to pick first for which characters, because that's more of a personal preference, but I will say you should pay attention to what abilities you have access to, what they do, and how to access them. Most of your early ability unlocks are going to add to your combos or increase the range of abilities you can use in combat, like better aerial attacks or dash attacks, which are important because you may eventually get a challenge that requires you to kill a certain number of enemies with dash or sprint attacks, so you'll need to have those available if you wish to complete them. Your heroic abilities are also important to use, but when you're starting out, you may not have the opportunity to use them as often as you'd like. Make sure you understand what your heroic abilities do and when to utilize them. All characters start with at least one primary attack heroic ability, one support ability, like Black Widow's group stealth or Miss Marvel's group heal, and one ultimate ability like Hulk's Thunderclap and Iron Man's Hulkbuster armor. Take some time to learn when to use these abilities because some of them are strong, but many don't make you invincible, so knowing when and how to use them will keep you alive. As I do deep dives into each character, I'll talk about when to use certain abilities in more detail, but for now, be careful that you don't waste an ultimate ability as it can take a while for it to come back. Mostly, learning your character's intrinsic ability is going to determine how you're going to fight enemies in the long run. For example, Black Widow and Iron Man have defensive counters, but Iron Man's counter is based around his intrinsic charge. If he's out of energy, you can't counter, so you need to watch that. Whereas Black Widow's counter will continue to work, but her intrinsic ability is built around not getting hit. The less you get hit, the more powerful your abilities that use intrinsic energy are. Hulk, on the other hand, has rage as his intrinsic ability, so you'll have to constantly build rage and use his rage counter to block attacks. Utilizing rage will generate health as you do damage, and mitigate some of the damage you take. But if you've got no rage, or the damage you're taking outweighs the amount you're healing, Hulk will not be long for this world. Finishers and team attacks are another important part of Marvel's Avengers. During a battle, you may find that you've attacked an enemy enough to where you have the opportunity to perform a finishing move. You can see how far you are from these attacks by looking at the stun gauge. You can see a bar underneath the enemy's health. When this bar reaches maximum, the enemy will be stunned and give you the opportunity to activate a finishing move. These finishers will request you press triangle and circle at the same time. While performing this attack, you may not always completely kill the enemy, but these attacks are always a good idea and should always be done whenever possible, as during the attack, you do a ton of damage to the enemy, you make them vulnerable even if you don't kill them, you're invincible while you perform the attack, and you will gain health after completing it. There is no reason not to perform these attacks. For larger enemies or bosses, these attacks will sometimes crop up during team play, even with an AI team. So during these team attacks, after you press triangle and circle, you may also see you have additional buttons that you need to press to complete the team attack. Pay close attention to the screen during this time so that you activate the skills when you're supposed to finish off the devastating attack. And there we have it. If you have any questions about anything that I've covered, or questions about something I haven't covered, please leave a comment and I'll respond to you as soon as I can. Subscribe to us if you find any of our videos helpful, and we appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.